Well, we're live and we're on the air up there.
We're talking tonight about questions, 5 questions for evolutionists. 5 questions for evolutionists. Some of you folks were in some of my workshops today. We talked a little bit about the creation model, the evolution model, and the importance of this out there today. There's some atheists and agnostics and evolutionists round about us. They're alive and well and kicking. Maybe you even know some of these guys. And how can we be armed? How can we be prepared? I'm looking at a lot of young people in here today. Some of you young people may go on to science or at least to, college, maybe even a master's or doctorate, advanced degree programs. And what you're going to find is it's a hostile environment for Christians. Season is open on Christians in higher academia today. What you're going to find is you go into the classroom and your teacher might say something like this, young man or young lady, how can you believe in creation? That's merely faith. That's merely faith. I hold to evolution, which is science. And so, by and large, the way the debate works out there isn't that you can't discuss your faith. Just don't do it in the science classroom. Go down to the religious studies department. Somewhere down there you can talk about that kind of stuff. Here we talk about stuff that's real, like science, like evolution, that's factual, that's proven. Not your silly miracles like this stuff, right? You might say, well, Dino Dave, aren't you just exaggerating just a wee bit? Are they really trying to knock the faith out of young people? Yes, they really do. Let me tell you a story about a young man named Jesse Kilgore. Here I have a picture of Jesse up there. This is Jesse Kilgore. Jesse Kilgore served our military. He did a stint overseas, and he came back, and because of the GI Bill, he was able to go to community college, and he took a biology class. And there in the biology class, the professor began to talk about evolution. Well, Jesse was raised as a Christian. His dad actually had been in the military as well, served in the Iraq War, had been a chaplain. And so Jesse said, I'm a creationist. I don't believe this stuff. And his professor began to mock him. Some of his fellow students began to make fun of him. And he tried his best he could. He wasn't really well versed in these types of things, but he tried his best he could to give a defense. And the teacher said, Jesse, I've got a challenge for you. I want you to go out. I want you to get a copy of the book, The God Delusion. The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. This has been a best-selling book on college campuses for a while. Atheism is kind of cool to be an atheist, And so Jesse Kilgore did it. And we know he finished the book because his bookmark was on the final page. And Jesse Kilgore would have the faith knocked out from underneath him. In fact, his friends they talked to afterwards said, well, after reading that book, he was pretty much an atheist with no beliefs in the existence of God in any form or an afterlife or even the concept of right or wrong. And this book so distressed him and so challenged him that Jesse Kilgore would take a gun and go out in the woods behind himself, his house in upstate New York, and would shoot and kill himself. That's a really sad story on a whole bunch of levels. I mean, it's a sad story that a professor would make fun of a Christian and single them out in class. I mean, you try doing that to a Muslim, I mean, there'd be lawsuits. People would be fired over that. But Christians, oh yeah, you can make fun of them, right? It's a sad story that he didn't go to his pastor or his parents and get some answers because, hey, this is a great answers to the things in this book. I'll tell you, Richard Dawkins is a pretty good scientist. As a biologist, he's okay. I've read a lot of his books. I got probably 5 or 6 of them in my library, all full of notes and stuff. This is probably his worst. He's not a great theologian or a philosopher. It's not even his training. It's not even his field. We'll talk about some of the difficulties in the book. But then also to think that you got to go out and kill yourself over it. So it's a sad story on a whole lot of levels. But the point is that there is a world out there that's not friendly to Christians. And yet we're told to go and make disciples. We're told not to be hunkered down in a pillbox somewhere on defense, but to be on offense. The Bible says in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, but sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asks you a reason of the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. We're obliged to be prepared to give an answer, to intellectually engage the world round about us. But notice something else here. We have not only the command to sanctify God and to have this answer prepared, but there's a second part to the command. Do you see there? What's the second part in that verse? There's a second command kind of within the command. What's that? Yeah, to have an answer of the reason of the hope, but there's a little bit more to it than just that. Who said meekness and fear? All right, Kevin gets the gold star tonight. It's not just to have an answer, it's how to answer. This is important. Sometimes we get exercised because we know we're right? And those stupid atheists and those dumb evolutionists and those ridiculous agnostics and these absurd skeptics, and we get all exercised and it's in the flesh. Can I share with you? I kind of used to be that way a little bit. I was going to win the debate, by gum. And here's what I've learned. You put your dukes up, and there's going to be a natural reaction on the other side. Guess what they're going to do? They'll put their dukes up, and you're going to slug it out. And maybe somebody might get a little bloody. But at the end of the day, it's pretty rare that anybody's convinced of anything. And so here's what I've experienced after God in his providence sets me next to lots of atheists on airplanes, and I've done some of these presentations at secular campuses and stuff like that. In my experience, an accusation hardens the will. A question will provoke the conscience. And that's why I've entitled this particular presentation 5 Qs, or 5 questions for evolutionists. Now, I've got some literature in the back, on my right, your left, in the back corner there. And one of them is a pamphlet entitled 5 Qs for Evolutionists. These are free. Please grab one of these or 2 of these, or if you're going to use them, hand them out. Grab a half a dozen of them. I don't want to take them all home. I also have one entitled Did Dinosaurs Coexist with Man? And you might like this for your own records, but if you have a friend who is a dinosaur lover that's got a gospel plan of salvation in the back, please take some of these. They're for your use. You'll also find some books back there. I have a hardback book that I've had for a little while now called Chronicles of Dinosauria. And really it starts right from creation and goes right through to the possibility, could some dinosaurs be alive today, and talks about it from a Christian, creationist, biblical perspective. It's a hardback. Those are $10. I've got a couple softback books out. These are new. This was my COVID project when I wasn't doing a lot of speaking. Was Dino Dave's Adventures in Apologetics. We got book 1. Now we just came out with book 2 at the beginning of this year. And these are $5 for the softback books. These are more for younger readers, though the older ones will enjoy it too, but it's written at a very simple level that even elementary can understand. Great for VBS or family devotions or Sunday school or homeschoolers, so you'd like them. They're laid out in little bite-sized chapters, and 12 chapters in each book with a bunch of questions afterwards. So feel free to avail yourself, especially the 5 Qs, which we're really going through in this session here. So here's what we're going to do on these 5 questions. I'm going to say the question, and then we're all going to repeat the question, just so it kind of sticks in our brains. Is you all with me on that? Okay, so here it is. Wait for it. Question number 1, where did it all come from? Let's say it. Where did it all come from? Now, this is kind of a really fundamental, basic sort of question, scientifically. Probably the most basic of all scientific laws is the law of cause and effect. Maybe you've had some science, and you might be familiar with the phrase, every action demands an equal and opposite reaction, right? Cause and effect. You see something like maybe an explosion, you say, well, what made that explosion? Or maybe we try the action to see what the reaction will be. The doctor might say, well, I don't know if it'll work, but let's try this medicine on you, come back and let's see if it cured you. So we're looking for a particular reaction, hoping for it maybe even, and we're going to try it. And so we live in a cause and effect world. This is maybe the most basic of all scientific laws. Even a baby knows you take this and you put it in that, you got an action, you're going to have a reaction, right? They might try it twice. They're not going to try it a third time. They're going to start understand the law of cause and effect real fast, right? And so when we begin to look at something like the universe, we have to say, well, where did it all come from? What chicken laid this egg? Where did it all come from? And of course, if you ask the evolutionists that, what are they going to say? Big Bang, gold star for this young man right here, right? Well, Dino Dave, don't you know there was this ginormous explosion and the whole universe just kind of came out of that. Now, we talked about this a minute ago, okay? You see an explosion, you say, well, what caused that, right? I mean, let's say you and I are kind of walking down the street. What's your name, buddy? Kyle. Let's say Kyle and I are walking down the street, and we come around a corner, and all of a sudden, boom, a whole building goes up in flames. And Kyle says, hey, Dino Dave, you see that, man? The whole building just exploded. I'm like, I don't worry about it. It happens sometimes, Kyle. It's no big deal. It just happens. Buildings do that sometimes. Oh, wait a minute. No, we don't want buildings doing that. I mean, there was a cause. Find out what the cause was. Was it poorly constructed? Was this a terrorist? You know, was somebody playing with chemistry? Was his brother playing with chemistry in the basement or something? I mean, what's going on with this? So if somebody tells you Big Bang, you don't let it rest there. I mean, explosions don't just happen. What caused that? Where'd that come from? And of course, if you ask that question, sometimes they'll just get a weird look on their face, like, you're not supposed to ask that question. Sometimes you might be talking to someone that knows a little bit of particle physics, and they might say, well, Dino Dave, don't you know, there was this vapor cloud, and this vapor cloud condensed, and it was the condensation of the vapor cloud that caused the Big Bang. Now, if they say that, what do you say? You guys are getting it. Pastor Lawrence is a smart crowd here, right? And you can keep doing this all day long until the cows come home, and guess what? You only got one of three possible answers. Now, I've done this presentation in Africa, I've done it in Europe, I've done it in Asia, I've done it all over the place, and I've never had anybody suggest to me that there are more than these three possible solutions. Number one is spontaneous generation. That is, the whole universe popped out of absolutely nothing. There was nothing, and then poof, there was everything. Now, you might say, no, wait a minute, that's not scientific. Nobody believes that. Well, here is 2015 college-level textbook on physical geology. Quote, according to the Big Bang Theory, the universe blinked, mind you, the universe blinked, violently into existence 13.77 billion years ago. You might wonder how a universe can be created out of nothing, or how we know the Big Bang happened at all. Creating a universe out of nothing is mostly beyond the scope of this chapter. End quote. Yeah, just a little bit, wouldn't you say? Here's a best-selling book, A Universe from Nothing by Lawrence Krauss. Modern science has now made it plausible that space, time, matter, energy, and even the universe can emerge from nothing. One of the best-selling books of my lifetime, Steve Hawking's Brief Answers to Big Questions. Hawking has passed on now to where he knows better, but it says this: space and energy were spontaneously invented in an event we now call the Big Bang. Nothing caused the Big Bang. Nothing. Here's physicist Paul Davies. He says, quote, the Big Bang represents the instantaneous suspension of physical laws, the sudden, abrupt flash of lawlessness that allowed something to come out of nothing. It represents a true miracle, transcending physical principles. Well, wait a minute. I thought the reason they didn't want creationism discussed in the science classroom was because of the miracles. Go down to the religious studies department, remember? Oh, but it's okay to have a miracle when we need it for the Big Bang? That's okay? Just a wee bit inconsistent, wouldn't you say? How is this belief, this lawlessness, any different from just saying in the beginning God created? Okay, if one's not scientific, certainly the other is also not scientific. No, this is an absolute position of faith. Worse than a position of mere faith, it's a position that goes against known scientific laws. For example, the law of cause and effect that we discussed. Well, there's another option if you don't like spontaneous generation. That is eternality of matter. That is, matter has just always been there. We got an eternal universe, whether it's in the form of a Big Bang, whether it's in the form of a cloud, or whether it's in the form of, universe as we kind of know it today. It's just eternal. It's always been there. Now, this was a really big thing in the Middle Ages, and actually goes all the way back to Aristotle. Aristotle took the position that cosmos is in a steady state, eternal, unique, and all-inclusive. The universe as a whole is ungenerated, as well as being indestructible. So it never had a beginning, and it can never have an end. The religious humanists in the Humanist Manifesto took this position. They said all the way back in 1933, quote, religious humanists regard the universe as self-existing and not created. But this has a massive scientific problem as well. You see, in science we have the laws of thermodynamics. They're some of the best established science out there. And there's a second law of thermodynamics called the law of degeneration, says this: everything tends to go toward disorder. That is, you build a building, and unless you maintain it, that building is going to crumble down. You might clean your bedroom. If you guys are into that once in a while, it would be a nice thing to do. But then guess what happens? Shortly thereafter, the law of cause, second law of thermodynamics takes effect, and it might not be quite, what it once was. It's like the little boy who came up from Sunday school, and he said to his mom, he said, Mom, my teacher taught me that God made man from the dust of the ground. Is that true? And the mom said, yeah, the Sunday school teacher's correct. That's true. And then the little boy said, and then she said that when man dies, he goes back to being the dust of the ground. Is that true? And mom said, yeah, that's true too. And the little boy thought for a minute. He says, Mommy, there's somebody either coming or going under my bed right now. Some of you guys have some dust under your beds kind of like that you might want to keep an eye on, that makes sure that somebody's not coming or going. So there's scientific problems with them. It's worse than just faith that it's not been observed. It's that they actually contradict known scientific laws. There's only one other possibility, and that is intelligent design. Now, I can't deduce the designer's character just strictly from looking at, science and logic. For that, we must go from general revelation down to specific revelation, namely the Word of God. But we can, at the very least, just from the laws of science, say there's only three possibilities, and two of them contradict known laws of science. The third one, while it requires faith, at least doesn't contradict the laws of science. And that's intelligent design. Now, as I say, I've done this presentation at a number of secular forums, college campuses and whatnot, and invariably at this point, someone raises their hand and says, well, wait a minute, Dino Dave, I got a question for you. And they'll ask this, well, where did God come from then? In fact, there's a whole chapter by Richard Dawkins, world's most prominent atheist, in his nasty little rant, God Delusion, that basically asks that question. And he thinks just by asking that question, he's pretty much disproved the existence of God. And he kind of phrases it this way. He says, if you think the universe is hard to explain coming along, well, God is even bigger and more powerful than the universe, so who made God? That's even harder to explain, so that's even less likely to happen than the universe. So how do we answer this question, where did God come from? We say, well, where did it all come from? Well, where did God come from? How do we answer that? Self-existing, okay, good. But is that different than just saying the universe is self-existing, the eternality of matter thing there? Or are we kind of in the same boat with those guys? Yes. He always was. This is true. God never changes and he's a spirit. Okay? It's all true. I want to phrase it just a little differently, though. In a way that I think's got a little more power to it. Anybody else want to take a crack at it? Yes. He's eternal. This is true. Very good. But again, they would say, well, that's fine, but I just say the universe is eternal. You say God is eternal. We're kind of in the same boat, right? What's the difference between the two positions? Okay, you're really close. The universe is matter, but God isn't. One more, back here.
The universe is created, God is not. There's a difference. He's outside of his creation.
Okay, very good. This is pretty much what I would say. We ask the question, where did that come from? Where did that come? Where did that come from? Because we live in a cause and effect world. Right? That's one of the fundamental laws that we observe in the world around about us is cause and effect. So that conditions us to say, well, where did this come from? It didn't just happen. This book, somebody made this book, and or where did this pulpit come from and this computer? We ask that because we live in a cause and effect world. Now, is God susceptible to the cause and effect law that he made? See, by anybody's definition, God is supernatural. That is, God does not obey natural laws. Now, if you want to say there's a box called the natural world, and there's nothing outside the box, there's nothing supernatural, everything can be explained by the natural laws. Well, then you got a problem, because I'm going to ask you, where'd that come from, where'd that come from, where'd that come from? And you don't got a good answer for me. I don't have a problem, because God is supernatural, which means he doesn't obey the laws of the box. He made the box. Does that make sense? If you don't get it, come chat with me, because it's kind of an important thing. We call this Psalm 19, verse 1, general revelation, the revelation of God from the universe, the cosmological argument. And it's so well stated here by the psalmist: the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Okay, who remembers what question number 1 was? Where did it all come from? You guys are pretty good. Okay, where did it all come from? Now, question number 2 is, how could a big bang create an ordered universe? Let's say it. How could a big bang create an ordered universe? So, let's say you've got a universe. How did it get to be ordered? That is, if you just had an explosion, what's the chance that everything's going to fall out just right to have a nice, tidy little universe that runs according to natural laws and is predictable, and we can even do science? See? For example, I've got a dictionary here. Could this dictionary have come out of an explosion in a print shop? Hang on a minute. No. Don't be too quick to judge this thing here. And let's say I told you that I was looking out my window. I was, Pastor Tim. Don't look at me like that. I was looking out my window, and 1 block down is a print shop, and I was looking at it, and I thought, boom, the whole print shop just explodes. And I went down to see if everybody was okay, and there was nobody there. But this came out of the explosion. Yeah, it did. Now, you laughing at me? I mean, why are you laughing about that? Huh? I hear the murmuring. The crowd's murmuring them. It's got a lot of parts. Yes, it does have an awful lot of parts. This one's got, like 3,000 pages in it. But what if I were to tell you that all those parts are in the print shop? There's paper in there, there's ink in there, there's glue for binding, there's a cover, cardboard, all the stuff you need is in that print shop. Yeah.
The machine has to work, or people have to put it together in order for it to.
Well, there's lots of energy from that explosion to make it work, right? Yeah.
Paper burns and incinerates.
Paper burns in the, well, I mean, so maybe it's got a little bit of a dark spot around the edges there, but.
Things would go to a disorder, not order.
So we have this law of thermodynamics, see, and we can see where things are highly ordered, and you can make a book. As it gets older, it falls apart, becomes illegible, pages crack. What brought it to that place of high order? It requires intelligence. We kind of intuitively know that. And yet we look at this universe, and you want to believe that just came out of an explosion? Why is it rational? Why do we have scientific laws that even permit scientific pursuit? What about the ideal environment for life on Earth? Is that just the result of a mindless chance? For example, let's just say, here's the sun, here's the Earth, and of course the Earth is going round and round the sun. What if it was a little bit closer? Guess what would happen to us? We'd be crispy critters. What's it a little bit further out? We'll be popsicles, exactly. You guys got this down. See, this thing has to be within a real narrow tolerance, and the universe is extremely fine-tuned for life. I mean, we're talking the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, the gravitational force. A guy named Donald Page from Princeton's Institute for Advanced Science calculated the odds against our universe randomly taking a form suitable for life as 1 in 10 to the 1,000 billion raised to the 124th. A number that exceeds all imagination. Paul Davies put it this way: scientists are slowly waking up to an inconvenient truth. It's inconvenient for some of these guys. The universe looks suspiciously like a fix. The issue concerns the very laws of nature themselves. For 40 years, physicists and cosmologists have been quietly collecting examples of all too convenient coincidences and special features in the underlying laws of the universe that seem to be necessary in order for life and hence conscious beings to exist. So you can look at this and say, well, we got really, really, really lucky. And that would be the position of the evolutionists. You know, it's just, wow, it's a great accident, man. Just all fell into place. You know, it's like me saying, I won the lottery 100 times in a row. I mean, you wouldn't believe that. Scientifically, that would make no sense. If I lived 1,000 lifetimes, I couldn't do that, right? And so we would prefer to look at that same exact evidence and say, incredible design, there must be a great designer. And that's the point of the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 1, verse 20. He says the invisible things, that is the things that we can't see about God, like, you know, his existence, his creative genius, his great power, from the creation of the world are clearly seen. Well, how can you see him if it's invisible? Being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so they are without excuse. No one's ever going to get in front of God someday and say, but God, you just didn't give me any scientific evidence. I'm a scientific guy. You just didn't give me enough evidence. It's not going to wash, my friends. God's given us plenty of evidence. People don't want to believe the evidence. It's not a mind problem. It's a heart problem. Okay, who remembers the first one was? Where did it all come from? The second one? Okay, somebody was taking notes back there. How could a Big Bang create an ordered universe? The third one of my favorites, how could life come from rocks? Let's all say it. How could life come from rocks? They might be saying, really? Evolutionists believe life came from rocks? Oh yeah, oh yeah. In fact, it used to be we believed that this was happening all the time. It used to be that scientists said you could just take some meat, you know, just dead meat of some cow or whatever, and just completely sterile, and there's nothing in there, nothing alive, just dead meat, and just set it there, and all by itself, it has the capability of just things coming to life in it, called maggots, stuff like that. Just poof, life would come from dead meat. And that was disproved by a guy by the name of Louis Pasteur, a Christian, by the way, a Frenchman. And he proved in the 1860s that, you know, this was, of course, flies laying their eggs on it, or maybe some spores coming from the air creating the mold. But if you sterilized it and sealed it, whoa, then there's nothing that came in that. You know, so his process of sterilization became known as pasteurization, and we have pasteurized milk still today because of Louis Pasteur. But in the process, he established a law, a scientific law, which is these really well proven things that have no known exceptions. And this law is called the law of biogenesis. And it very simply says this: only life begets life. We've never observed an exception to this. Only life begets life. So this law effectively kills off the whole Darwinian story of goo to you via the zoo. Because how does the goo come to life? How does this raw chemistry come to life? And if you say, well, maybe we need a creator just to get it started, well, then the creator could just, well, make the creatures just like the Bible says in the book of Genesis. And so evolutionists can't go there. They don't want the creator, so they have to say that somehow life came from rocks. And this used to be a little bit more plausible in Darwin's day when they didn't understand the complexity of the cell. But today, we know of the enormous complexity in even a single-celled creature. You've got all this machinery in here. You've got, you know, your cell nucleus and your ribosomes over here and up there. And you've got, of course, your Golgi apparatus and your smooth ER and your ER. And I mean, all this transportation systems, and it's moving energy in and moving waste products out, and replication systems, and all this incredible complexity that we still really don't completely understand. We're just learning it and trying to figure it all out. Take, for example, replication. Somebody asked this afternoon, what would it take to make the most basic unit of life capable of replication? And there's nothing simple. You can't. The machinery's got to all be there. The complexity in just one cell, all those chromosomes, the DNA. In fact, if I were to take your DNA and stretch it all out, and normally it's all coiled up, but if we would stretch it out from one person would reach back and forth to the moon 100,000 times. That's the recipe to make a you. And it all fits into a teaspoon. Incredible information. But it's more than just the DNA. What could you do without all these other pieces? You need this critical cellular control kits. You need DNA markers. You need the interacting RNA. You need ribosomal machinery. You need precise enzyme timing and copying machinery. How could all these pieces come together just by chance in this single cell, in the first cell, so that then it can start, replicating and you start getting evolution? And so we read things like this, 2018, in a textbook. The transformation into a primitive living cell capable of further evolution appears to require overcoming an information hurdle of super astronomical proportions. An event that could not even happen within the time frame of the Earth, except we believe as a miracle. Hey, this is in a science textbook. Wait a minute. I thought we couldn't have those. Oh, but it's okay to have one when we need one to get life from rocks. See? It's like, believing that a bunch of apes just typing away at computer consoles over, millions of years are going to produce the complete works of Shakespeare. They're just going to ruin the systems, man. They're going to just make a mess. And yet we read things in Science magazine like this. You owe your life to rock. Not God, rock. Give thanks, bow down, rock. Thank you, my great-great-great-grandfather, right? By the way, have the scientists made life in the laboratory? I mean, from no life to life. No. Even with tremendous intelligence and millions of dollars of equipment, we cannot do it. The closest that we can get is heating up some water, throwing it through some tubes, adding in some methane, ammonia, and hydrogen, and maybe an electric spark, and then we have down the bottom here some red goo will collect that's rich in amino acids. So what's an amino acid? Well, it's just a molecule that if you were to get it long enough and fold it just right so that it holds its form, could become what we call a protein. And the protein is one piece, maybe a nut or a bolt or a hook joint of a machine of which there's millions of them in one cell. That's how far away we are. And by the way, even if you could get a living cell and you put it in this environment, guess what would happen to it? Methane? And sparks and boiling water. Well, I mean, you put living things in there, guess what would happen? You kill them, right? I mean, if all you needed to make life was just to have all the ingredients in one place and stir it up real good, I could take a frog and put him in the totalizer there and mix him up really good, and you just leave him all by himself, and it would all come together and form a frog, right? Say, no, Dino Dave, would just be a sad day in Frogville. And yes, it would. And yet, I read things in biology textbooks like this, quote, "This was Darwin's warm little pond, the famous prebiotic soup. The prebiotic soup would contain organic building blocks dissolved in water." Here's a zoology textbook, 2020. "The early organic molecules accumulated in the primitive oceans to form a hot, dilute soup. In this primordial broth," and it has all this wonderful stuff, soup. Here's the ecology textbook. "Recently, it's been suggested that hydrothermal vents are a potential site for the origin of life on Earth. Vent water may be the ultimate soup in the sorcerer's kettle. Soup. I'm waiting for Campbell's to come out with primordial soup, and there will be your great-grandpapa on the can right there." No. I don't have enough faith to believe this kind of stuff, my friends. Bible says in Acts 17:25, "He, that is God, giveth to all life and breath and all things." Okay, question number 1 was? Where did it all come from? Question number 2 is? Getting a little better about that one. How could a Big Bang create an ordered universe? Question number 3 was? Okay, he's got that one down really good. Number 4, let me say it. How could biological systems assemble by accident? Let's all say it. How could biological systems assemble by accident? So let's say you've got a single cell life that's formed. Now you got another problem. How are you going to go from a bacterium to wings, compound eyes, sonar systems, blood clotting systems, reproductive systems? I mean, how are you going to get all this complexity? You see, long before you get a reptile that forms the wing to become a bird, he's going to have a half a wing that's not good for flying, but it's also a hindrance for running, and he's going to be the first one that gets eaten and gets selected against. A half-formed system isn't a helpful system. It's just eating up resources. And folks, we've got systems upon systems that are so crazy complicated. And all the pieces have to be there for it to work. Even Darwin, in his book, Origin of the Species, he was puzzled by the eyeball. He says, to suppose that eye could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree. And yet Darwin tried to make a case for it and did the best he could, but it's just, I mean, we understand it now even more than he did then. The retina of your eye. I mean, I talked about the complexity of one cell. In less than 2 square inches, your retina has 100 million light-sensitive receptor cells. You know, all these rods and these cones. The eyeball is an amazing system. Our cameras are nowhere near as good, the optics. How about the blood? The Bible says in Leviticus 17:11, the life of the flesh is in the blood. The blood's one of the most amazing tissues of the entire body. It brings in oxygen and food, carries away waste. It fights intruders. It clots itself so it can heal itself. Truly, this blood is a river of life. How do you get this blood all functioning, circulating? How do you get a pumping mechanism? How do you enrich it with oxygen? How do you have this closed tubes that carry it all through, and then it has to come back through the lymph system? And our heart is part of this whole thing. A machine the size of a human fist pumps 2,000 gallons of blood a day through 60,000 miles of blood vessels, and you don't even think about it until it stops working. You see, my friends, life's complex systems are a lot like a mousetrap. I have this mousetrap here, and some of you guys have seen me do this, so you know I'm good at this. I'm a highly trained scientist. Don't try this at home. I'm going to set this thing here, and don't you in the front row worry now. I got this. Not ever killed anybody yet. Just taking a couple of ears out, but we have the hammer, the catch, the bait, the base, the holding bar, and the spring. We got 6 pieces. If I take away one of those pieces, how many mice am I going to catch? None. Why wouldn't I catch maybe 1/6 less mice? It's not going to work, right? It's either all there or it's not going to work at all. And that's a good metaphor for biological systems. For example, we talked about this simple little single-celled bacterium. One cell, as small as we can get, and all the complexity. How does it move itself through water? So if it eats all the nutrients around here, how does it move itself over to somewhere where, and by the way, that's what happens in our bodies, right? We get infected with bacteria and they move all over the place. And the way they move is a little outboard engine. It's called a flagellum. And this little flagellum is a motor so tiny that 8 million of them could fit across a human hair. And yet it can run at 100,000 RPM. That's pretty crazy. And we know all these parts, we recognize it because we build outboard engines. Now, some of you guys that understand mechanics a little bit, what would happen if I were to take my car engine and crank it up to 100,000 RPM? A big bang would take place. You would hear it out in the parking lot, right? That was the end of Dino Dave. He did his last speech. Airplane jet engines run at 100,000 RPM, but this can do something that a jet engine can't do. It can stop in less than a quarter of a turn and reverse direction. Try doing that with a jet engine while it's in the air. Actually, on second thought, don't try it. I'm going to show you a little animation of this in a minute, but I just want you to see, we know what all these parts are, the rotor, the stator, the bearings, the hook joints, these membranes, because we build outboard engines. Can you imagine being the first guy who's looking at his microscope? Hey, Charlie, come here, I got an outboard engine in here. In the bacteria! Look at this. That's moving the bacteria through water. But can I share something with you? You take away one of those pieces, and it's dead in the water. It takes 40 proteins to build this bacterium. What good would be one with 39 of them in place? Nothing. Here is 2017 Science Technical Journal, and we're making some progress when something like this makes it into the Science Journal. Look at this. The bacteria flagellum exemplifies a system where even small deviations from the highly regulated flagellar assembly process can abolish motility and cause negative physiological outcomes. Can somebody translate that in English? What did he just say? Yeah, it won't work. Why couldn't he just say it won't work? You make one little change and it won't work. Well, if he would have put that, that would not have been, Science Magazine, I guess. Here's the takeaway. Changes by mutation, random accidents, don't create ordered systems. They destroy them. We don't ever observe new systems coming online by accidental changes. Never. Oh, we'll see two-headed turtles. We'll see fruit flies with 6 wings and 7 wings and all different things. Maybe they survive for a while at best, then they die off, or maybe it's a congenital birth defect, they come out as a monster and they don't even survive. And so here's Werner Gitten, he's head of the German Institute of Physics. He says, information only arises through an intentional volitional act. There's no natural law through which matter can give rise to information. Neither is there any physical process or material phenomenon known that can do this. Here's an evolutionist, Shapiro. And he says, as many biologists have argued since the 19th century, random changes would overwhelmingly tend to degrade intricately organized systems rather than adapt them to new functions. As the psalmist said, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Okay, question number 1 was, where did it all come from? Question number 2 was, you guys are getting it down. Well done there, Madam Green. Number 3. How could life come from rocks? Question number 4. Oh, we just lost it on that one. Fell off the reservation. How could biological systems assemble by accident? And our last one here, why do we have a soul? Let's all say it. Why do we have a soul? This ends up being a bigger problem for evolutionists than you might first think. You see, we can look at a tree. Here's a tree, right? You guys are in the North Country up here. Some of you guys burn wood. You ever take a chainsaw and go, meh, 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 and cut down the tree, and the tree says, ouch? You ever had that happen? No? See, they just got a body. They don't have feelings. But how about if I started cutting on this guy with a chainsaw? Would he say ouch? Well, he's going to say something, right? Yes. There's something different going on in there. He's got a brain. He's a little different than just a tree. But can I submit to you that no ape has ever built an altar? No dolphin has ever said, where did I come from? Where am I going? No dog or no cat has ever said, is that right or is that wrong? There's something unique in man. We call it a soul. Here's neurosurgeon Michael Egnor. He says, we are more different from apes than apes are from viruses. Our difference is a metaphysical chasm. Systems of taxonomy that emphasize physical and genetic similarities and ignore the fact that human beings are capable of abstract thought and contemplation of moral law and eternity are pitifully inadequate to describe man. You just want to look at it and say, well, we're very similar to apes because, they've got 2 eyes and we got 2 eyes. And they got a nose, we got a nose, we got 2 ears. You're missing the whole massive difference here. The soul. That doesn't show up on your evolutionary, charts. I'm going to show you a quote by atheist Bering. And this is one of my absolute most favorite quotes I've ever seen. This is Jesse Bering. He's an atheist and he says this. As a way of thinking, God is an inherent part of our natural cognitive systems, and ridding ourselves of him, really thoroughly, permanently removing him from our heads, would require a neurosurgeon, not a science teacher. He doesn't want to believe in God. He can't get rid of God. It's stuck in his brain, and he hates it. He's got a soul. The soul points to God. Evolutionists have tried to push this idea that man's nothing but a moist robot. But such materialism doesn't square with our human experience. We know better. If we're nothing but a cosmic accident, Why should we even trust what seems to be rational to our brains? So you believe in evolution? That means you believe you got here by a complete accident? That means the molecules just happen to come together this way? Well, why would you even trust your own thinking then? It'd be self-defeating. You lose all sense of meaning. Atheists, famous atheists, have ended up there very just discouraged and almost suicidal. Bertrand Russell, brilliant man, he said man's origin, his growth, his hopes, his fears, his loves, his beliefs are but an outcome of accidental collocation of atoms. A very bleak, deterministic view of life. Purposeless. Terrible. Michael Behe, who is an intelligent design theorist, believes in a creator. He says this: those who declare they have no mind, are not intelligent, conscious, or free, are hardly in a position to reason about any topic, let alone the state of mind they deny having. Even Charles Darwin privately confessed in a letter to a friend that he had some severe doubts. He said, "But then with me the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of a man's mind, which have been developed from the mind of the lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust the convictions of a monkey's mind if there are any convictions in such a mind?" So we come back to our question, why do we have a soul? Well, during the last few decades, there's been this search of what we call inner space, trying to understand our brains, trying to understand the mind. Researchers in the field of cognition are still struggling to understand how the mind's qualities spring from living tissue and electrical impulses. This is a quote: "Souls and synapses are hard to reconcile." A master's degree textbook quote, Anatomy and Physiology, "Souls and synapses are hard to reconcile." Why is such a problem? Why is such a problem for the evolutionist? Even Richard Dawkins, in his nasty little book, The God Delusion, on page 168 says, quote, "The origin of consciousness might be another major gap." He talked about the unlikelihood of life from non-life. "The origin of consciousness might be another major gap whose bridging was on the same order of improbability." Why is Dawkins so bothered by consciousness, having a conscience? Let me illustrate here. I always like doing this, it's kind of fun. Let's say everybody in this section right here are carnivores. You guys like pepperoni and bacon and sausage on your pizza, a bunch of carnivores. You got nasty claws and teeth. You guys are all meat eaters. Like it. We over here, we're nice little herbivores, fuzzy little harmless animals. Now, I will tell you this. Even the vegetable-eating herbivores over here still, according to evolution, got where we are by stepping on each other. Somebody gets a mutation that's a little ahead of everybody else, and they get to get most of the vegetables themselves. They get to have most of the mates for themselves, and they leave more offspring, and that's how their mutation gets passed on to the next generation. That's how the herbivores have gotten as good as they are, is slowly over millions of years of evolution by, kind of stepping on each other a little bit in the struggle for existence and natural selection. So we're all here, and let's say that my friend Mr. Button here happens to be, stand up for a minute. I know I can pick on him. Scott's a good sport. So let's say he's the first one that gets a mutation for a conscience. Everybody else just stepping on themselves, trying to step on their friends, get the most goodies, the most vegetables, and leave the most offspring for themselves. And he's over here saying, where did I come from? Where am I going? What's right and wrong? And while he's contemplating the order of the universe, we look, and here comes the carnivores over the hill, and we're all like, bah, because they're scary. They got long claws, they got sharp teeth, and they're coming chasing after us. And everybody that's herbivores, we're all running for the woods, right? And let's say Dino Dave hits a tree root, and I go down, I sprain my ankle, I break my knee, and everybody else that's the herbivore looks back and says, oh, poor Dino Dave, we're out of here. Except for Mr. Button here, who has a conscience. And he comes along and says, hey, Dino Dave, come on, man, let me give you a hand. Picks me up. Well, what's going to happen to him? He going to be dinner. There's no benefit to having a soul. None. In the evolutionary scheme. Thank you, my friend. And that keeps Richard Dawkins up at night, and it gives the atheists fits. Why do we have a soul? There's no benefit in the evolutionary scheme of things. None. And the Apostle Paul uses it as a powerful argument in Romans 1:19, because that which may be known of God is manifest where? In them. In them, for God has showed it unto them. And even atheists bearing saying, I can't get rid of God. He's in there. I just can't get rid of him. Ah! Okay. I always like doing this at the end. Is there anybody without notes, brave soul, that would like to give me all 5 of the cues? Anybody can say them or want to give it a shot? Every once in a while I get somebody who does this. No? It's okay. All right. So here we go. Where did it all come from? How could a Big Bang create an ordered universe? How could life come from rocks? How could complex biological systems come by accident? And why do we have a soul? So there's some ammo. Go get yourself one of the pamphlets. Even if you can't remember all of them, maybe you can remember a few of them. So if somebody ever puts you on the spot, you can say, sir, I have 5 quick questions for you about origins. You see, I believe creation is the better model. We are to have a graceful answer. Our speech is to be seasoned with salt. And we're supposed to be able to answer every man of the hope that lies within us. I like the analogy of salt. The Bible uses it multiple times. Jesus uses it. Matthew 5:13 says, you're the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It's thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and trodden under the foot of men. Salt scientifically is interesting. Salt adds flavor to things. You get something like an egg, doesn't have a lot of flavor. You add some salt, it makes a big difference. We should be adding flavor to an unsavory world for a God who has a taste for holiness. Salt also has a antiseptic capacity. So you might not have, something like a hydrocortisone cream to put on a wound. If you put some salt on it, it'll burn, but it'll actually help it heal faster and help keep it clean from infection. Salt also has a preservative ability. And you guys fishermen out here? What do you go fishing for?
Freshwater, saltwater, cod.
Cod. Okay, let's say I got a bunch of cod. They've been sitting in my yard for like 3 weeks or so, but let's have them for dinner. You want to fillet them up and eat them?
I give them Alan.
You give them to Alan. You eat this kind of thing often, Alan?
I use this fertilizer.
Fertilizer, okay. I'll buy that one. Pastor Tim, where do you get these guys? Really? Good night.
They're related.
They're related. We got evolution going on down there in Hampton. If it's been sitting in the yard, you don't want to eat this thing. And yet you can salt fish and put it in barrels and take it out to sea and eat it a year later because of the preservative capacity of salt. And so Jesus has this rich analogy. We are to be helping to preserve a world that's decaying round about us. With the power of the gospel, with the power of our testimony, we're to make a difference in the world round about us. How about you? Are you making a difference? Are you making a difference in your neighborhood? Are you making a difference in your workplace? Or are you just kind of floating downstream like a dead fish? It takes work to go upstream, doesn't it? But we need to purpose in our hearts to make a difference. Life is short. Life is short. It's not the pastor's job. He's not going to even probably ever get to see the people in your workplace. It's your job. It's my job. What on earth are you doing for heaven's sake? What on earth are you doing for heaven's sake?